So hello and greetings. This is Dr. V.C. Sontake and I am the course faculty for the course Engineering Thermodynamics. So let us start Unit 3, which is devoted to second law of thermodynamics. So objectives of this lecture are: first, to enlist and explain limitations of first law, to explain the need and importance of second law, why actually second law is required, to define thermal energy reservoir and mechanical energy reservoir, introduce and explain the concept of cyclic heat engine and its efficiency. So all these things are basically building blocks for second law of thermodynamics, and these basic terms will help you to understand exactly what is second law of thermodynamics. So let us first discuss the syllabus of the Unit 3, second law of thermodynamics. So second law of thermodynamics or Unit 3 once again have two subparts. In first subpart, we will talk about second law of thermodynamics. So its introduction, thermal energy reservoirs, Kelvin-Planck and Clausius statements of second law of thermodynamics. Then we are going to define heat engines, refrigerator, heat pump, perpetual motion machine, first and second kind, Carnot cycle and thermodynamic temperature scale. So this is subpart of Unit 3. In second subpart, we are going to discuss about the entropy. The outcome or quantitative analysis of second law of thermodynamics is done on the basis of one property of the system called as entropy. So in this, Clausius inequality, entropy, principle of increase of entropy, change in entropy for different thermodynamic processes with TS diagram. Like in Unit 1, we have described calculation of work done for different thermodynamic processes with the help of PV diagram. Similarly, with the help of TS diagram, we can calculate entropy change for different types of thermodynamic processes like isothermal, isobaric, polytropic, so on and so forth. Then we will define reversible and irreversible process, which is very important concept in case of heat and work interaction. Then availability. So this is all about the syllabus structure of Unit 3. Now I will suggest a book for this topic, Thermodynamics and Engineering Approach by Yunus Cengel. R.K. Rajput is okay as far as the numericals of this subject, this topic or Unit 3 are concerned. But if you really want to develop yourself and you really want to enjoy second law of thermodynamics, this book is very Thermodynamics by Yunus Cengel is very interesting, particularly to study the Unit 3. There are many stories are narrated in this book in the Unit 3, second law of thermodynamics topic, which will help you to understand the real sense of second law of thermodynamics. Otherwise, for our normal routine and numericals, all those things, R.K. Rajput and E.K. Narg is sufficient. So let us start our discussion on second law of thermodynamics. So before going into the detail of second law of thermodynamics, have a look on first law of thermodynamics. We will revise the first law of thermodynamics first. The very first statement of first law of thermodynamics for a closed system undergoing a thermodynamic cycle. The statement goes like this. If a closed system undergoes a thermodynamic cycle, net heat transfer equals the net work transfer or a vice versa. Mathematically, in a cycle undergone by a closed system, summation of all the heat transfer, summation Q is equal to summation W, where Q is net heat transfer during the cycle. It may be possible that cycle has been completed by undergoing different processes such that last state is identical with initial state. So summation of all those heat transfers involved in those individual processes is equal to summation of work transfer in the same individual processes undergone by the closed system to complete the cycle. The first statement of first law of thermodynamics also implies that heat and work are mutually and fully convertible in a cycle. Heat can be fully converted into work transfer and work can be fully converted into heat. So mind well, this is very important, you can say, outcome of first law of thermodynamics. Heat and work are fully and mutually convertible. The second statement of first law of thermodynamics is for closed system undergoing a process. What is that statement? In a process undergone by a closed system, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can be transformed from one form to another. And mathematically, if a closed system is undergoing process 1-2, Q12 is equal to delta E plus W12, where Q12 is heat transfer during this process, W12 is work transfer during that process, and delta E is change in the total energy of that system. So Q12 is equal to E2 minus E1 plus W12, where E2 is final energy, E1 is initial energy. And we also know that total energy of the system is equal to summation of kinetic energy plus potential energy plus internal energy. So this statement can also be expressed Q12 is equal to delta E plus W12 if change in kinetic energy and change in potential energy of the system is 0. Under such condition, what happens? Because delta E is equal to delta KE plus delta PE plus delta U. So if these two terms are 0, change in entropy, change in kinetic and potential energies are 0. Under such condition, change in total energy will be due to change in total internal energy, where U is internal energy of the system. Okay, so I try to conclude. First law of thermodynamics says that heat and work are fully and mutually convertible to each other, and whenever a cycle or process takes place, energy conversion takes place from one form to another. Okay, and that process or cycle is possible. So these are the useful inferences of first law of thermodynamics. Now, using our concept of first law of thermodynamics, let us try to explain some of the processes, some real life examples, and to these processes, first law actually can't explain. So the very first example is a cup of hot coffee kept in a colder room. If a cup of hot coffee kept in a cold room, you will find after some time the hot coffee gets colder. Okay, and that takes place spontaneously on its own. You need not to do anything. Whereas if a cold coffee is sorry, if a coffee is kept in a colder room, if a hot coffee is kept in a colder room, it won't get hotter automatically. Hot coffee will get colder on its own, but hot coffee kept in a cold room won't get further heated on its own. Now here, in both the cases, energy conversion is taking place. Even if some heat we are receiving from colder room into the hot coffee, some form of energy conversion is taking place. Okay. And first law says that whenever there is an energy conversion, that process or cycle is possible. So according to first law, reverse process must also take place here. That is, hot coffee is getting colder automatically. So hot coffee gets further hot kept in a colder room. Because here also some form of energy from the cold room is converted into energy of hot coffee. And first law says that whenever energy conversion takes place, that process is possible. So first law is not able to explain the reverse phenomenon. Similarly, in second case, okay, if you are rotating this paddle wheel, this paddle and this wheel, this paddle and this wheel with the help of the weight which is being lowered, so this wheel will rotate, and because of this paddle will also get rotated. So actually what we are doing some work on the fluid kept in this container. So when this weight is being lowered, wheel will rotate so as the paddle wheel. So actually we are doing some work on this fluid. And what we find after some time, the temperature of this fluid in this container is increasing. So what does it mean? When some work is applied, when some work is done on this fluid, that work is converted into heat. So that process is possible. Work is converted into heat. According to the first law, first statement, that process is possible. Okay. But is the reverse process possible? When I try to heat this paddle by heating this fluid, let's say I am heating this fluid, so heating of this fluid will also cause heating of this paddle wheel. So do you think because heating of this paddle wheel, the wheel will get rotated and the weight will be get raised? No. The reverse of this process is not possible. You have done some work W on this fluid, so it is converted into heat Q, its temperature has increased. But on the other side, if you heat this fluid, it won't make this paddle and this wheel to rotate and this weight to be raised. But in this process also, energy conversion is taking place from heat to work. So according to first law, the reverse process must also take place, isn't it? But that is not taking place. So first law is failed to explain this phenomenon. In third example, let us take an electrical conductor. So when electricity of I current is passed through this electrical conductor, what happens? Because of the Joule's effect, because of the electrical resistance of this electrical conductor, some amount of electricity will be converted into heat, and here some energy conversion is taking place. So process in this direction is taking place. Now is reverse process of that possible? Means if you heat this electrical conductor, will that heat will be converted into electricity? The answer is very straight, no. Heating of this electrical heater is not going to convert that heat into electricity. But according to the first law, here also energy conversion is taking place, and whenever there is energy conversion is taking place, that process must possible according to first. So, what is the outcome of this discussion? In all these three applications, hard copy does not get cold, hard copy does not get heated in a cold room. Heating of paddle and wheel does not make the paddle and wheel to rotate, and heating of electrical conductor does not make electricity to generate. In all these three examples, in the reverse direction, though energy conversion is taking place, first law is being satisfied, but these processes are not possible in the reverse direction. Okay, so what can I say? These processes cannot occur even though they are not violating the first law. According to the first law, the energy conversion is also taking place in the reverse direction as well. But first law is not able to explain why these processes are not possible. Let us take some more examples. Water is always flowing automatically from in a waterfall from high level to the low level side. Reverse is not possible. That water does not flow from low level to a high level side. Though in this direction also energy conversion is taking place, first law is being satisfied. Gases expand from a high pressure to a low pressure. Let's say there is a wall. If you open this wall and this is high pressure side and low pressure side, gases will expand automatically from high pressure to low pressure. But expansion does not take place from low pressure air to the high pressure air side on its own. First law is not able to explain, even though it is not violated and energy conversion is also taking place. Heat flows from a high temperature to a low temperature. For example, if your favorite chocolate tea is kept in a cup, let's say it is heated at 98 degrees Celsius. So after some time, if it is kept in a room and air is having temperature of 24 degrees Celsius, so what you find, after some time, the chocolate will automatically get colder. But the reverse process is not possible. It will not heat it further beyond 98 degrees Celsius kept in a room. That is, heat flow is not possible on its own from colder room to the hot chocolate. So once again, in all these three examples, processes are taking place in a certain direction, and in reverse direction those processes are not taking place, even though first law is satisfied, energy conversion is taking place. So why these processes are taking place in a certain directions and not they are taking place in a reverse direction, first law is not able to explain. So from this discussion, all these discussions, what can we conclude? We can conclude that first law is having some limitations, and because of those limitations, it is not able to explain the occurrence of processes in certain directions. It does not tell about the direction in which the processes will take place. So what is the first limitation of first law? It is clear from the arguments just now we had that processes proceeds in a certain direction and not in the reverse direction. The first law places no restriction on the direction of a process. But satisfying the first law does not ensure that the processes can actually occur. Just now we have seen, according to the first law, water can fall from high level to low level and low level to high level, because in both the directions energy conversion is taking place. First law is being satisfied. Okay, so it places no restrictions on the direction of the process to be occurred. This law presumes that any process can take place in either direction. First law says that if energy conversion is taking place in that particular direction, process is possible. So this is something very interesting. This law presumes that any process can take place in either direction. So this is the first limitation of first law. The second limitation, first law states that the heat and mechanical work are mutually convertible. And just now we have seen, or from many examples we will see in the future discussion, mechanical work can be fully converted into heat, but only a some part of the heat energy can be converted into mechanical work. First law says that heat and work are fully mutually convertible. And in some of the examples just now we have seen, work can be fully converted into heat, but heat cannot. So again, first law is not able to justify this. This means that heat and work are not fully mutually convertible. In other words, there is a limitation on the conversion of one form of energy into another. There is some limitation. The first law, however, fails to state the conditions under which the energy conversions are possible. First law does not talk about the condition that how much work will be converted fully into heat, but first law does not tell about the condition how much heat will convert into work. It is failed to explain that. And the last limitation of first law, the first law is concerned with only the quantity of energy, that is conversion of one form of energy into another form quantitatively, whether it is a heat is converted into work and vice versa. And the transformation of energy from one form to another with no regard to quality of conversion or transformation. It does not tell about the quality of conversion. Okay, so these are two things. First law always talks about quantity. Okay, heat will fully converted into work, work will fully converted into heat. But it does not talk about the quality. Okay, so these are the three limitations of the first law, which are failed to explain some of the real phenomena. And because of these limitations of first law, there is a need of another law which will overcome the limitations of the first law and is possible to explain the occurrence of different phenomena in certain directions. So from there, the need arises to have another law, that is second law of thermodynamics. So introduction to second law. Here comes into picture the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, so right now I am not actually defining what is second law. I am trying to introduce, or I am trying to correlate the facts which will form the basis of definition of second law. So just now we have seen the processes occur in a certain direction and not in the reverse direction. So processes in a nature takes place in one direction, and in the reverse direction they do not take place on its own. Okay. So if a process has to occur in a nature, it has to satisfy first law as well as it has to satisfy second law as well. Process must satisfy both the first and second law of thermodynamics to proceed or occur in a certain direction. Okay. So both the laws must be satisfied. So major applications of the second law. Number one, the second law may be used to identify the direction of processes. That is why second law is called as the law of direction. The second, point number two, the second law also asserts that energy has quality. What does it mean? 100 kilojoule of heat and 100 kilojoule of work. From the first law point of view, both appears to be same. But from second law of thermodynamics, quantitatively 100 kilojoule of work and 100 kilojoule of heat are same, but qualitatively there is a difference between these two. This is the important conclusion. The first law is concerned with the quantity of energy and the transformations of energy from one form to another with no regard to its quality. Whereas the second law provides the necessary means to determine the quality as well as the degree of degradation of energy during a process. Work is fully converted into heat. 100 kilojoule of work can be fully converted into 100 kilojoule of heat. But 100 kilojoule of heat is not converted into 100 kilojoule of work. Quantitatively both are same, but this is the quality which defines the degradation of one form of energy into another during its conversion. And point number three about second law. The second law of thermodynamics is also used in determining the theoretical limits for the performance of commonly used engineering systems such as heat engines and refrigerators, as well as predicting the degree of completion of chemical reactions. So second law of thermodynamics will tell you about the theoretical limit of conversion of work into heat or heat into work in a certain engineering devices like heat engine, refrigerator and pump. It will also tell you about the completion of particular chemical processes in certain direction and not in the reverse direction. So from this discussion what I can say, second law is the law of direction of the process. Second law talks about the quality of the energy the particular system is possessing, and second law tells about the theoretical limit of conversion of one form of energy into another. All these things are not explained by first law of thermodynamics. So some of the useful inferences I would like to have about second law of thermodynamics. Second law states every process takes place in certain directions. It is a directional law. Now second law is able to tell no, it is not that energy conversion is taking place. First law is being satisfied, so all the processes will take place. No. It tells about the occurrence of the process in certain directions and not in the reverse direction. So it is a directional law. Number two, the second law also asserts that energy has quality as well as quantity. Very important inference of second law of thermodynamics. Number three, heat and work and these are two different forms of energy, have different qualities of energy associated with them. 100 kilojoule of heat and 100 kilojoule of work are different qualitatively. Number 4, work is said to be high grade energy and heat a low grade energy. Wow, this is something very important outcome of the second law of thermodynamics. Now it has differentiated heat and work, which are both the same forms of energy. Work is said to be high grade energy and heat a low grade energy. So work is always at the top of the pyramid, quality pyramid, and heat on the lower side. And this is told by second law of thermodynamics. Number 5, work can be fully converted into heat, but heat cannot be fully converted into work. So I can also say the very general statement of second law of thermodynamics. The complete conversion of high grade energy into low grade energy is possible, but complete conversion of low grade energy into high grade energy is not possible. I can also take example to explain this. You can make a good person bad completely, but you cannot convert bad person into gentleman forever. Some traces of badmanship will be remaining inside that person. Okay, वो बोलते ना, अच्छे आदमी को हम बुरा बना सकते हैं, बट बुरे आदमी को अच्छा बनाना बहुत डिफिकल्ट है. And even though he will convert into gentleman, some traces of badmanship will be there. That is the simple inferences of second law of thermodynamics. The complete conversion of low grade energy into high grade energy is impossible, whereas complete conversion of high grade energy into low grade energy is possible. And the second law of thermodynamics says that there is certain limit, and this is theoretical limit, for certain processes to occur, which was obviously not defined by the first law of thermodynamics. Now, if a engineering device is there where conversion of heat into work is there, so second law is able to explain how much heat will be converted into work. The theoretical limits it is able to define. So these are some of the useful inferences of second law of thermodynamics. Work is a high grade energy, heat is a low grade energy. Energy has quality as well as quantity. And according to the second law of thermodynamics, all the processes in nature proceeds or take place in a certain direction, not in the reverse direction. Got it? Yes. So now from here onwards, I will be defining second law and cyclic heat engine. So before further explaining what is second law, I will be defining cyclic heat engine first and the basic terms related with the cyclic heat engine, because second law is best expressed or explained in terms of a system, and that system is cyclic heat engine. Okay. So before going to the detail of second law, first we will be defining cyclic heat engine, and before defining cyclic heat engine, I will be defining some basic terms related with the cyclic heat. So second law and cyclic heat engine. So the very first basic term related with the cyclic heat engine is thermal energy reservoir, and in short they are called as TER. So what is thermal energy reservoirs? Any hypothetical large body in the sense having large mass, Okay, I will not concentrate here on the size of the body, rather mass. So any hypothetical large body with large mass with a relatively infinite thermal energy capacity or thermal heat capacity that can supply or absorb large, ideally infinite amounts of heat without undergoing any appreciable change in its temperature or energy content is called a thermal energy reservoir or just a reservoir or heat reservoir. So you take any body of large mass and this body is such that its heat capacity is infinite. Heat capacity is the product of mass into specific heat, that is MCP. So its heat capacity or thermal energy capacity is infinite. So it is, if you take some amount of heat from that body and you give some amount of heat to that body, its temperature is not going to change appreciably. So such body is called as thermal energy reservoir. I once again read out this statement for you. A hypothetical large body with very large mass with a relatively infinite thermal energy capacity or heat capacity that can supply or absorb infinite amount of heat without undergoing any appreciable change in its temperature or energy content, and that body is called as thermal energy reservoir, TER, or just a reservoir. Okay, so thermal energy reservoir is having infinite heat capacity. Examples now, which can be termed as a practically which body can be termed as a thermal energy reservoirs. So large bodies of water such as ocean, lakes, rivers and ponds, as well as our atmosphere, industrial furnaces, boiler furnaces, combustion chamber of an IC engine and nuclear core reactor. Okay, in all these bodies, their heat capacity is so large, ideally infinite. If you supply some heat from these bodies or take out heat from these bodies, their temperature is not going to change significantly. So atmosphere, river, lake, ocean can be termed as thermal energy reservoir. So bodies with relatively large thermal masses can be modeled as a thermal energy reservoir. Okay. We will continue with our discussion thermal energy reservoirs. Now, thermal energy reservoirs are often referred to as heat reservoirs since they supply heat or absorb in the form of heat. So many times I will also call thermal energy reservoirs TER as heat reservoirs because they exchange the energy to or from their surrounding in the form of heat. So that is why they are also called as a heat reservoirs. So thermal energy reservoirs and heat reservoirs both are same. Now, a heat reservoir or thermal energy reservoir that supplies energy in the form of heat is called a source. This is always at higher temperature. So there is a thermal energy reservoir and its temperature is very high and it is able to give some heat to the surrounding or to the other system. Such thermal energy reservoir is called as a source. So if a thermal energy reservoir is able to supply some heat, it will be called as a source and it will be at higher temperature. Similarly, a reservoir that absorbs energy in the form of heat is called a sink. This is always at lower temperature. So if a thermal energy reservoir is able to receive the heat without appreciably changing its temperature, it will be called as a sink, and this will be at lower temperature. So now thermal energy reservoir, and to this thermal energy reservoir I can call it as source or sink. It depends whether the thermal energy reservoir is supplying the heat or is receiving the heat. So source will supply heat, source thermal energy reservoir will supply heat and will be at higher temperature, and sink thermal energy reservoir will receive heat and it will be at lower temperature. A source supplies energy in the form of heat and sink absorbs the heat. Very simple. Okay, so if this is the thermal energy reservoir, it will be called as a source if it is able to give or supply heat, and this will be at higher temperature. That is why it is presented on upper side. A thermal energy will called as a thermal energy reservoir will called as a sink if it is able to receive heat, and this will be at lower temperature. So source is at high temperature, sink is at low temperature. Now, what are the different examples of source and sink? So just now I have discussed in previous slide. I can go to the previous slide. Industrial furnace, boiler furnace and combustion chamber of an IC engine and nuclear reactor. All these systems are having their temperature very high and their heat capacity is infinite. So they are able to supply heat to their surrounding. So these will be the example of source: industrial furnace, boiler furnace, combustion chamber of an IC engine and nuclear reactor. At the same time, ocean, lakes, rivers and ponds and our atmosphere, they are able to receive the heat without appreciably changing its temperature. You supply any amount of heat to the ocean or our atmosphere, its temperature is not going to change significantly, and they are at lower temperature. So they are the examples of sink. So example of source: industrial furnace, boiler furnace, combustion chamber of an IC engine and nuclear reactor core. And examples of sink: atmosphere, river, lake and ocean. Okay. So from here you please keep in mind very important differentiation. Thermal energy reservoir will be called as a source if it is able to supply heat, its temperature will be higher. Thermal energy reservoir will be called as a sink if it is able to receive heat, and this will be at lower temperature. Now, representation of source and sink. Many times we need to discuss including the source and sink. So how they are represented. So this way I can represent the source at, let's say, temperature T1 and sink is at temperature T2. Source will be represented on the top side because its temperature is higher side. Sink will be represented on lower side because its temperature is lower. And this way also we can represent source and sink. So please remember this representation of source and sink. Now then comes mechanical energy reservoirs, MER. What is that? A mechanical energy reservoir is a large body which can be stored, work as a potential energy such as raised weight or compressed spring, or as kinetic energy such as rotating flywheel. So mechanical energy is a system which is able to store the mechanical energy in the form of potential energy or kinetic energy. And this large body is covered by an adiabatic wall. So during storing of mechanical energy, no heat transfer can take place across the mechanical energy reservoir because its walls are adiabatic wall. All processes of interest within a mechanical energy reservoir are essentially quasi-static, that is very small that is process will take place at a infinite slow rate. That is the meaning of quasi-static. And an MER receives and delivers mechanical energy quasi-static. Examples: raised weight, because raised weight will store the mechanical energy in the form of potential energy. Compressed or wound spring and rotating flywheel. Rotating flywheel will be able to store the mechanical energy in the form of kinetic energy. Now, among the above example, furnace cannot store work as a potential energy. So, furnace is not the example of mechanical energy reservoir. Rather, furnace is able to store the energy in the form of heat. So, it is the example of thermal energy reservoir, and it cannot store the work. That is why furnace or atmosphere or nuclear reactor, they are not examples of mechanical energy reservoirs. Okay, so thermal energy reservoir and mechanical energy reservoir, TER and MER, and source and sink. So now comes cyclic heat engine. Now after defining TER, source, sink and MER, now let us define cyclic heat engine, because this is a very important system and the second law of thermodynamics can be best expressed in terms of cyclic heat engine. Now, heat engines are the devices that convert heat into work. They receive heat from a high temperature source, for example, solar energy, oil furnace, nuclear reactor, combustion chamber of an IC. They convert part of this heat into work, usually in the form of a rotating shaft, and they reject the remaining waste heat which is not converted into work to a low temperature energy reservoir called as a sink. For example, atmosphere, rivers, lakes, ponds or oceans. And they operate on a cycle. That is why they are called as cyclic heat engine. Now inside this heat engine or any other cyclic devices, we use generally a fluid to and from which heat is transferred while undergoing the cycle. This fluid is called as a working fluid. So what is happening actually inside a cyclic heat engine? Heat is being received by that heat engine from the source. That heat is converted into work, and remaining amount of heat which is not converted into work is rejected to the sink. And see, from source to the heat engine and from heat to the sink, heat transfer is taking place. So some medium must be there which is able to carry this heat transfer. So the medium which is used in the cyclic heat engine is called as its working fluid. And all these cyclic heat engines are operated on a cycle. That is, they will start from an initial point after undergoing different processes. The last processes will be such that the last state is identical with initial state. Okay. So that is cyclic heat engine. Now one such heat engine is shown in the figure. So this is the heat engine or cyclic heat engine. It is operated between a source, obviously at high temperature TH, and a low temperature energy reservoir, that is sink TL. So TH is very large as compared to TL. So what this heat engine is doing actually, it is receiving Q input amount of heat from the source, converting this heat into work W net output and rejecting remaining amount of heat which is not converted into heat to the sink. So heat engine converts part of heat Q1 from the source to net work output W net and reject the remaining heat Q out to the sink. So that is a simple function and construction of a cyclic heat engine. Okay, remember it is operated between source and sink. So this is heat engine. Okay. Now once again representation of cyclic heat engine. So cyclic heat engine can be represented in this fashion. This is the source at temperature T1. This is the sink. This is cyclic heat engine. It is receiving Q1 amount of heat from the source at temperature T1, converting W net work output, which will be the difference of Q1 minus Q2, and we reject Q2 amount of heat to the sink at T2. T1 is obviously greater than T2. This is another way of representing the cyclic heat engine. Okay. Please remember this representation, the way we represent the cyclic heat engine. Now, question comes, why do we require heat engine at all? So let us try to understand this from, let us say there is a container containing some water of known mass water and initial temperature T1. Initial temperature of the water is equal to the atmospheric temperature. Inside this container and water, there is a stirrer or a mechanical paddle wheel system. So what happens when we rotate this paddle wheel? So what we are doing? We are doing some work upon this paddle wheel. After some time, what do you observe? Temperature of this water starts increasing. In a thermodynamic language, what can I say? When a work is done upon this paddle wheel, that work is converted into heat. Okay? That means work can be converted into heat very easily. Simply such a simple device is required to convert work into heat. Now, is it possible with the conversion of heat into work? Let us try to find out. Now, consider the same system. Now, if we heat this water, which will in turn heat this paddle wheel system, do you think because of heating of this paddle wheel, the paddle wheel start rotating on its own? The answer is very straight, no. So in terms of thermodynamic language, what can I say? Conversion of heat does not come easily and naturally and requires a special device such as heat engine. It is not that you will heat this paddle wheel and it will start rotating. That means you will get work output from this device. No, it is not as simple as that conversion of work into heat. So to convert heat into work, we will require a specialized and sophisticated and complex devices. So that is why we require heat engine. Now examples of cyclic heat engine. The very first example is mass contained in a cylinder. So internal combustion engine and aero engine. For example, there is a cylinder, piston and containing some known mass of gas. Okay. So what happens? When you supply heat to this gas, it will expand. Piston will be moving in the upward direction, and if this piston is connected to the crank, this linear motion of the piston will convert it into rotary motion. That is, you will get work output. So heat is converted into work output. Similarly, when you take out the heat from this gas, it will expand, it will compress, and piston will be moving in this direction. Okay, or I can also say when the piston is moving in the leftward direction, it is doing some work WC on the gas, and as a result of this compression, the gas will reject heat Q2 to the surrounding. So this is a specialized device, internal combustion engine or aero engine, where heat is converted into work or work is converted into heat. Similarly, steam power plant is a very good example of cyclic heat engine. Steam power plant is operating between energy source furnace. This will be at high temperature, let's say T1, and it is operated between a low temperature thermal energy reservoir, sink, and rivers or lakes or oceans are sink in case of power plant. So furnace, boiler furnace will be the source in case of steam power plant, and river, lakes, atmosphere or ocean can be the sink, okay, in case of the steam power plant. Steam power plant consists of boiler, turbine, condensers and pump. So the purpose of all these four components is to convert heat into work, and okay, like boiler will receive Q2 amount of heat into boiler from the furnace. It will receive heat Q1. So boiler will convert water into steam. This steam will be expanded in the turbine, which will convert or which will produce work output W output. Then this steam will be passed into the condenser, where it will reject the Q out amount of heat, which is not converted into heat, and steam will convert into water, and this pump, by consuming some W amount of work, will supply this water further to this boiler, where heat will be supplied to it from boiler furnace. So this way cycle will get completed. So this is cyclic heat engine, and here water is a working fluid because water is taking heat in the boiler, converting into steam and undergoing expansion. Further here it is rejecting heat. Further in the pump it is accepting heat. So heat transfer is taking place inside this power plant component via a water. So water is a working fluid. Similarly, in case of internal combustion engine, this gas is a working substance or working fluid. Okay. So these are two very good examples of cyclic heat engine. Now can you suggest me some more examples of cyclic heat engine? Please write in the comment box or chat box. So there will be net heat transfer. Q net will be heat supplied minus heat rejected, or work output will be work done in expansion to the work done in compression, or net work output produced to the net work consumed. These are the two important terms related with cyclic heat engine. Now thermal efficiency of heat engine. So thermal efficiency of a heat engine or any thermal device is defined as the ratio of net work output to the total heat input. For example, let us say there is a cyclic heat engine operating between the source at temperature TH and sink at temperature TL. Obviously here TH is greater than TL. I can say much greater than TL. Okay. And the heat engine is receiving QH amount of heat from the source, converting this heat into W net amount of work and rejecting QL amount of heat to the sink. So what will be the net work output? W net output will be difference of heat supply to the heat rejected to the heat engine. So thermal efficiency symbolically represented eta thermal is equal to W net upon total heat supplied QH. Okay, so it can be also written as QH minus QL over QH. So after simplification, I can get this expression for heat supplied, thermal efficiency of cyclic heat engine. Eta thermal is equal to 1 minus QL upon QH, where QL is heat rejected, QH is heat supplied to the engine. In terms of temperature, if I represent thermal efficiency, it is called as thermal efficiency of reversible heat engine, and it is given as 1 minus TL over TH. I will come across the term reversible heat engine. Okay. So this way I can represent thermal efficiency of heat engine in terms of heat supplied and in terms of source and sink temperature. So even the most efficient heat engines reject almost one half of the energy they receive as waste. So it is not that heat engine will convert all the heat supplied to it into heat. Most of the part it will reject it to the sink. Now differences in thermal efficiency. So from the discussion of cyclic heat engine and its efficiency, can I say all the heat engines are having same thermal efficiency? The answer is no. Different cyclic heat engines have different thermal efficiency, and even if the two cyclic heat engines are operated between the same source and sink temperatures, they can have different thermal efficiencies. For example, in this case, two heat engines 1 and 2 are operating between source and sink. Both are connected to the same source, both are connected to the same sink. Heat engine 1 is receiving 100 kJ of heat and producing 25 kJ of work output and rejecting 75 kJ of heat to the sink. So thermal efficiency of this heat engine 1 will be 25 by 100, 25%. Whereas heat engine 2 is receiving 100 kJ of heat from the source, converting 35 kJ of heat into work and rejecting 65 kJ of heat to the sink. So its efficiency will be 35 divided by 100, 35%. So I can say thermal efficiencies of different thermal engines will be different. All heat engines do not perform the same way, and it is up to the heat engine what will be its efficiency or what will be its ability to convert heat into work. So different engines, heat engines can have different efficiencies even if they are operating between the same source and sink. And so it is possible to have different types of heat engines depending upon their efficiencies. Even the most efficient heat engines reject a huge fraction of the input energy. And because of this very fact, thermal efficiency of heat engines are not very high. For example, thermal efficiency of common heat engines, automobile engine only 20 to 25%, which is very small. Aero engines 25 to 30%. Gas turbine power plants only 40%. Combined cycle power plants 60%. In combined cycle power plants, we try to combine different types of cyclic heat engines. So maximum efficiency we could get is 60%. So there is a much scope in improving the efficiency of cyclic heat engines. Now see, just now we have seen efficiency of thermal efficiency of cyclic heat engine is 1 minus Q heat rejected to the heat supplied, isn't it? 1 minus thermal efficiency is 1 minus Q rejected to the Q supplied. So what is the inference of this thermal efficiency term? If QL is equal to 0, that is heat rejected by the heat engine to the sink is 0, efficiency will be 100%. So can we save Q out? In a steam power plant, the condenser is the device where large quantities of waste heat is ejected to rivers, lakes or the atmosphere. So can we not just take out the condenser out of the plant and save all that waste energy? It means if there is no condenser, there will be no waste heat by the turbine or by the steam power plant to the surrounding. So its efficiency will automatically become 100%. Is it possible? Is it as simple as do we think? The answer is unfortunately firm no, for the simple reason that without a heat rejection process in condenser, the cycle cannot be completed. Unless otherwise we complete the cycle, we cannot complete the processes in cyclic heat engine. So reason is that if we could reduce the heat rejected by the heat engine to the sink to the 0, its thermal efficiency would have become 100%. But without rejecting heat by the heat engine to the sink, we cannot complete the cycle. Hence, we cannot reduce or we cannot stop the rejecting of heat to the sink. Q out or Q rejected will always be there. We cannot reduce it, rather we can minimize it. We cannot prevent it, we can try to minimize it. Now there comes also one concept is reversed heat engine. So just now we have discussed the cyclic heat engine. What it does, cyclic heat engine, it receives heat Q1 from the source at temperature T1, converts part of that heat Q1 into network output and rejects the remaining amount of heat Q2 which is not converted into work to the sink T2. So in a cyclic heat engine, processes are taking place from source to the heat engine to the sink. Now there is another concept called as reversed heat engine. The processes in this reversed heat engines are just opposite of the processes taking place in a cyclic heat engine. That means in reversed heat engine, it will receive heat Q2 from the sink at temperature T2 and it will supply heat Q1 to the source T1. Here source and sink will remain the same. Source will be at higher temperature than the sink. Source will always be at higher temperature. Sink will always be at lower temperature. So T1 is greater than T2. So what is happening inside reversed heat engine? Reversed heat engine is receiving heat Q2 from the sink at temperature T2 and supplying heat Q1 to the source at temperature T1. And in doing so, it is consuming some amount of work. So that is why it is called as reversed heat engine. Okay. if I could draw cyclic heat engine for you, what will be cyclic heat engine? There will be source. Obviously, T1 is much greater than T2. So, cyclic heat engine will receive heat Q1, will convert some part of this heat into work and will reject Q2 amount of heat to the sink at temperature T2. So, the direction of processes are clockwise, I can say. That is from source to sink. Whereas in the reversed heat engine, direction of processes from sink to source. It is producing work output, it is consuming work input. Okay, so reversed heat engine is also very important concept in case of thermodynamics and with regard to second law of thermodynamics. So after watching this video lecture, at the end of the lecture, learner will be able to enlist and explain limitations of first law, to explain the need and importance of second law, to define thermal energy reservoir and mechanical energy reservoir, and will be able to introduce and explain the concept of cyclic heat engines and its efficiency and the concept of reversed heating. So with this, I come to an end of this video lecture. Thank you for your kind attention and passionate listening. Happy learning.